What were you thinking? Welcome to the next conversation hosted by Dr. WP Wahl from the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education, bringing you cutting-edge resources for better thinking and learning.
Well, good day and welcome to our podcast, What Were You Thinking? A podcast produced by the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. Today we've got a very exciting conversation with Ms. Livia Wong, and we're going to talk about the mediation of challenge. Ms. Livia Wong is the Director and Senior Speech Therapist of IACE Learning Solutions based in Hong Kong. She was trained as a speech therapist and audiologist. She has extensive working and teaching experience on various populations of different nature and age, including learning difficulties, attention deficits, autism spectrum disorders, and hearing impaired. She's a Feuerstein instrumental enrichment trainer, both in standard, basic, and tactile, and has conducted training in Hong Kong, Macau, Australia, and New Zealand. Livia, you are so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, William, for inviting me to do this podcast. I'm very excited and honored to be able to speak with you today.
And of course, this is an exciting moment also for us. It's the first time we are interviewing somebody from that region, world region, where you are from. So you are. This is pioneering work that you are doing.
Well, yeah, I suppose that I'm one of the few who is working in the area, and I'm in Hong Kong, and which is a very famous city now all over the world, I suppose.
Livia, so we're talking today about the mediation of challenge, the search for novelty and complexity, and of course this is one of the 12 MLE parameters from Feuerstein. So why do you think is the ability to tackle challenges important for better thinking and learning in the classroom?
Well, I think we have been into 2020 now, but we have gone through a lot of revolutions since like the 1700s when we firstly used the steam engine. So from then on, we have actually passed on quite a number of revolution in terms of industries. And now we are moving on to the fifth, where we are using a lot of AI. And this is actually a great challenge to many people, not only for like students, actually for all the people like elderly, the working class, and all these people are facing a new era because everything is ever fast moving. And especially with the COVID-19 lately, well, things change even more drastically. And of course, being educators, we always want to prepare our students for the world, right? We are not preparing them for what is happening now. We are preparing them for the future. And I think being able to, accept challenge or to face challenge is one of the very important things for educators right now.
And I think what you say is so important, because oftentimes when we think about the fourth and, people starting to talk about the fifth industrial revolution, yes, we think that technology is going to solve all the problems, it's going to take all the challenges and problems away, but of course we know that's not the truth.
No, definitely not.
And we need the mediation of challenge and to instill the search for novelty and complexity, especially as we navigate into the fifth industrial revolution. So, Livia, would you like to describe what is the mediation of challenge?
Well, the mediation of challenge itself is, I think there is two parts to it. One part is about mediation, and mediation itself is an interactional process between the developing human organism, or maybe the learner, and an experienced, intentional person who wants to impose him or herself between the learner and the external sources of stimulation. And by doing that, mediates the experience by selecting, framing, focusing, intensifying, and feeding back environmental experiences in such a way as to produce appropriate learning sets and habits. So that part is mediation. But mediation of challenge specifically is talking about how we can make our students be able to accept challenge. When we want to do that, we need to understand how our brain works. And I suppose most people would use the analogy of a computer, that we have like three phases in thinking. And we have the input, we have the elaboration, which means the processing, and the output. Very simply, input is gathering data. Elaboration is analyzing and reorganizing your data, and thereby generating new information. And output is expressing the results of processing. But then if we look into it in more details, in each of these phases, there are many little thinking skills which is responsible for different functionalities. And in order to be able to tackle challenge, we need to pick the right ones in the input phase, or in the elaboration phase, or in the output phase, so that we now are understanding that, I want my students to be able to face challenge. We need to pick the right things to do it. So at the input phase, we would need to actually systematically collect data, which must be precise and accurate for further processing, because we are facing something new. We need to be able to collect the right data in a right way. And then after we get the data in the processing phase, then we need to, see what the challenge is and define it accurately. So with these, we are able to make hypotheses. And with the hypothesis, we also need to be able to compare existing solutions to the newly identified challenge. So there is a lot of work there in the processing. And then, of course, when we are ready and we have thought through our solutions in this new challenge, how are we going to meet it? We sometimes may need to create new solutions, which is creativity, to meet the challenge. So you need to use your existing things and resources to build new things. And after that, we need to do in the output phase, we will need to maintain our emotional stability, because when we are tackling challenge, a lot of the times our emotional equilibrium is being shattered, and we have to maintain an emotional stability and deliver the solution appropriately. And so that is what I think about how and what is actually tackling challenge. Is a pretty complicated condition.
I think what you share, Livia, is so important, and I just want to highlight the notion that you lifted out, is that in the mediation process, the mediator, whether it's a parent or a teacher or an older peer, sort of interjects himself or herself between the learner and the environment. And when we talk about the mediation of challenge, it is to focus the attention of the learner on the challenge. And what just comes to mind is that oftentimes without that, our children or learners will just back out. They'll just say, no, this is too difficult, I can't do it, it's too challenging, it's not within my reach to do it. But if you actually then do as a mediator on input, elaboration and output level, showing them where to look, showing them what to listen for, showing them where to focus their attention, how to think about it, how to respond to it, the uncertainty disappears, and it actually becomes an exciting experience, doesn't it?
Yes. Very, very true. I think this is exactly the case when I meet a lot of students. They are faced with challenges and they will just back off. And a lot of the times maybe the parents or the teachers will give too much support or too little support. So being mediating challenge is really very tricky in certain sense, because you need to give the right amount of input, which you talked about just now.
And I think the reality, especially in developing countries like South Africa, is that oftentimes our learners, because they come from deprived circumstances, believe that they cannot do it. And they need somebody that actually believes more in them than what they believe in themselves. To say, listen, but you can do it. You just need to focus here, and you just need to think about it like this way, and you need to respond in such and such a way. And so in that regard, our parents and our teachers actually play such an important role to start to believe in children more than what they believe in themselves.
You're absolutely right, because I think it is very, very normal to feel fear, not only about the deprived children, but also for others when we are actually having to step out of our comfort zone in a challenging situation. It is not easy. But I think as teachers, there is one quality or one way of working which would help our students very much, is to cultivate enthusiasm. So when there is fear, I think the teachers can show an open and keen attitude themselves. So by showing that, okay, I also have that fear, but let's work together. Okay, and then the children, the students will get the support. I mean, first of all, from the emotional support, that they will be supported. And I think that is a very important thing that what teachers can do in the classroom, and that is part of mediation as well.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about what Professor Feuerstein said, is that cognition and affect, the emotional part of the learning processes, are two sides of a translucent coin. And you can't take the emotional and the affective side away from cognition. And by the way, he said that on the edge of the coin is then the mediated learning experience. So, Livia, what would you recommend? How can educators apply the mediation of challenge in the classroom?
Well, besides what we talked about, having this enthusiasm by ourselves, I think building a challenging environment is also very important. Sometimes teachers would like to give a tasks which are similar and repetitive. But instead of doing that, I think the teachers could try to select something that is unfamiliar and a bit novel, but it is appropriate and related to the topic of learning at that moment. So it would be logical to start from some simple challenging tasks and then gradually building up more complex ones. So it will be more acceptable and more easy for the students to step out. Besides, I think when we work through these challenges, what the teachers can do is that they should always encourage creativity. To help them to look into situations with different viewpoints. But sometimes it would be very challenging, how to make sure that students would be creative, because they would say, I don't know, right? And I think one of the ways that I am always doing is ask a lot of questions. A lot of questions, and maybe I'll give them some ideas sometimes in case they really have nothing in them, and ask them to comment on what I suggest. And in that way, they will start to think more. Maybe in a group situation, students can work together to find out some better responses or better solutions for that challenge.
And so maybe a practical question that teachers and parents can ask is, just simply, what would be a different way how we could approach this? Or, how do you think people in different circumstances would handle the situation or approach the situation?
That is right. That's a very good example of a question. And sometimes the parents and the teachers will also need to wait. Sometimes we don't wait long enough for them to answer. We are so into them giving us a good answer or a creative answer, and we don't wait enough. So waiting is another thing that we would need to do. Besides, I think there is another thing that we would always want the students to receive challenge, but at the same time evaluate their solution. to evaluate the risk of taking that challenge in certain ways. Of course, we don't want the students to put themselves into like unreasonable risks. So after they suggest solutions, we would always ask them to evaluate the risk and make sensible and appropriate moves. So creating a habit of finding new solutions and evaluating the solutions before they act, I think, is another important thing that teacher can do in classroom.
And this touches quite a lot also on the mediation of regulation and control of behavior, that we don't just impulsively jump into new things, but we evaluate the risks and we make a calculated decision.
Yes, that's right. You can see that, well, the parameters of mediation actually interweave into each other. So it is not always just standalone, but we have to see what we are targeting at that time. So for this time, maybe we want to mediate for challenge. We also use the others to help us to reach that goal as well. Whenever the students, after they face a challenge and they experience success, please celebrate. Do celebrate, because that is helping them to move on to the next challenge. Because once they have this experience, this taste of success, they would want to go for the next one. And then you can make your challenge more higher, more complex, and that will build them one by one. The success will build the next success. And of course, at the point of having that success, after that celebration, we always want them to review again, to be insightful about what is that is helping them to face that challenge, what is helping them to get to this point, and what is, well, maybe avoiding or preventing from getting that point. So no matter it is the good side or the bad side, well, we would suggest the students to actually review and reflect on themselves so that they can repeat the success and avoid further mistakes.
Absolutely. And I mean, I didn't think about it, but you're absolutely right. The reflection after the new experience is as important as the new experience. You know, I can just imagine parents sitting with their children and telling them, you know, but you were afraid in the beginning. You were anxious to do it, but you did it, you know, and well done and congratulations. But tell me, what did you learn from it? You know, what did you experience? And that could actually open up a wonderful conversation and create such depth in the learning experience.
Well, sure. I remember that some of my clients, when I told them that I don't believe that you can actually do it and without my help, and they were so shocked. They don't believe themselves. The first time they think that I'm just joking or trying to make it up. Yeah. And until they can really talk about it, they realize that they can actually do, and then we will do something that is very closely repeated, but not exactly the same, to ensure that what they have learned is consolidated and reinforced. And in this way, a lot of the times, the next time we are having a new challenge, the student is more willing to say yes to a more difficult task.
So, Livia, before I'm going to give you an opportunity for some concluding remarks, I just want to encourage our listeners really to mediate the search for novelty and complexity, to search out experiences that are new and complex for our children, and that could mean that you take your child to the theater if they've never been to the theater, or take them on a trip into the countryside to a place where they've never been. I recently had a conversation with an elderly lady, and due to COVID, she was very much confined to the old age home, and got the opportunity now recently to go and visit some old friends in a different province. And I said, well, this is wonderful, because, you're going to go out and experience new things and so on. So, but as mediators, we must create those opportunities. And as you indicated, encourage and compliment when people are actually embracing new and novel experiences. Livia, some concluding remarks, something that you want to leave our listeners with?
Right, sure. I think very important that we have to understand that we are actually stepping into this fast-changing 21st century. to be able to be tackling challenge is one of the most important abilities that we want our students to have. Once they have this ability, they would eventually become better thinkers and determined learners. And why is it so important? Because it will in turn reduce the dropout rate of students and improve achievement. This ability really requires a lot of integration of our brain functioning throughout the thinking process. But as teachers, we can do it step by step. You can build a challenging environment, you can cultivate enthusiasm, you would encourage creativity, and you would like to establish the habit to evaluate risk and reinforcing success. And with all these little skills that you can do it on a day-to-day basis in each classroom without too much time and money and resources, you will be able to equip your students with the skills to tackle challenges. And you will not be long to find out that your children, your students, will be able to accept more challenges and to be able to move forward and to shine in their life.
Well, Livia, thank you very much. I really appreciate your open sharing of your expertise and information. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This was a conversation with Ms. Livia Wong. She is the Director and Senior Speech Therapist of IACE Learning Solutions based in Hong Kong. And we had a wonderful conversation about the mediation of challenge, the search for novelty and complexity.
This podcast was brought to you by the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. Visit our website at www.ilearnthinking.org or on social media at iLearnThinking.